Welcome back to Senior Savvy Cannabis. I'm Katherine Goldberg. Today, we're lucky enough to be joined by Kirk Barry. I reached out to Kirk after I saw a post that he made about THC being at 47%. We all kind of laugh about THC inflation, but I didn't realize that taxes are involved in THC percentage. So I wanted to get Mr. Barry on the podcast to explain, is this fraud? What exactly is happening, and why is no one being held accountable?
Um, Good questions.
A lot of
Um,
questions all at once. And
yeah,
or do you want to start by telling us your background? Because cannabis fraud investigator is a new one, even for me.
yeah. Well, so I have a heavy background in investigations. I was a law enforcement officer for 21 years, and then I worked with as a collision reconstruction expert, so civil litigation field for another 25 years. I've testified in 350 jury trials and given my deposition 450 plus times and worked on about 8,000 cases altogether. So in about 2009 or so, I kind of transitioned over into the cannabis space, really cannabis and hemp. And what I'm looking at is basically document fraud, fraud of any type. And really, I guess if we made a phrase out of it, it would be consumer fraud
Hmm.
and all of its many angles. Yeah. So then I guess to your question, um, one of the things that we're looking at here, what type of fraud is this when we find fraud, and how do we find fraud, and what is it? And I think one of the most important places to focus on is the label information on a product. Really going to tell you a lot. That coupled with testing results, and you've probably heard this term knocked around, you probably used it yourself 1,000 times, COA,
Mm.
which means certificate of analysis, which is the results that a laboratory gives their customer based on the product that they brought in to have tested. And so there are
And that's our best
several.
bet as consumers. I tell people the only chance you have at trying to figure out how a product might make you feel is by looking at the COA. But are you saying that not all COAs are accurate?
Yeah, we have a real problem in these industries, and so let's chop it up into two industries: hemp and cannabis.
Okay.
So when we're talking about the hemp industry, and mainly I'm talking about vape devices, vape pens, vape cartridges,
Like
flower.
THCA that's sold like
Yeah,
online, like
yeah, all the vapes,
all the
vapes
Delta
and
8, Delta
gummies.
9. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Delta 8. Lots of people call them the D8 products, right?
Yeah.
Or it could be flower products, it could be pre-roll, but they all live in the hemp sector. They're
Okay,
not
sure.
licensed cannabis business, but they're a
Separate.
operating hemp business. In my testing, 91% of the products of the vape pens that I test are actually marijuana or cannabis. They're not hemp at all.
Did you
And
91% or
91%,
inaccurate?
right. And for flower products, it's 99%.
Eh,
I know it's sad. And so
Are
if
their
I'm a
machines broken? What is going on?
yeah, now what they're doing is they're defraud the business is defrauding their consumer. And it's collusion. It's about, I think about half the time it's collusion, and about half the time it's sample fraud, where a business will create a sample that they know is going to pass
Mm,
certain guidelines and restrictions,
mm.
have that tested, but then what's in the package looks nothing like the COA. And so when I look at COAs, predominantly, almost 100% of the time, the product that's advertised on the box, it might say DN, HHC, THCO, hydrox 11,
This
whatever it
is
happens
on
to
the
be.
hemp side of things.
Right. Yeah. We're only talking about hemp.
Okay, and
Just
then
hemp.
let's talk about hemp and then make sure we also talk about cannabis because that's where.
Abs-
Okay,
Absolutely.
great.
So the information on the box is nothing like their certificate of analysis. I think what the hemp sector does is they have boxes printed up somewhere,
Uh-huh.
and then they have those boxes and they have all kinds of advertising on them, and then they go out and they buy concentrates on the spot market, and they come and they fill their vape pens, they put it on the shelf with a fake COA and they sell it to you. I was just looking at the hemp doctor in North Carolina the other day. I know I pulled down maybe 101 different COAs. I think all but five are fraud. All but five are document fraud, as in totally made up, not bad results from a lab, just somebody cut and pasted a COA, and then the hemp doctor puts it on their website to appease you and your curiosity, the consumer's curiosity about hemp products. So that's one example. I
This is
know
mind
it's really
blowing. And
it
then
is
what's happening
shocking,
on
isn't
the
it?
legal cannabis side? Because I also see, there are all these Instagram accounts about
Uh,
like the cannabis recalls in California, and I feel like every day there's another recall. So is it just as bad on the cannabis side? Because a lot of us are using it as medicine, and we don't want to be
yeah.
lied to.
Right. And you want to be able to dose, right? I mean, if you've got a medical problem, maybe you're controlling pain or anxiety, or you want to sleep at night. So you go out and you buy a product and you want the label to be correct because, you're puffing on something, or you're taking a hit of something, or you're eating half a gummy, or whatever it happens to be, and you want to try to control your dosage. You don't want to get so high you can't sleep, but you want to, or, and you want to be able to sleep or whatever have you.
Of course.
Here's what I think about the cannabis industry. I think overall about half of the cannabis products are labeled incorrectly. And when I say that, I mean it might be potency,
Mm.
particularly if it's high potency flower and vape and gummy kind of products.
Like the
Not necessarily.
46% THC flower that you posted. And by the way, I did a blog post about that. You guys can read that if you want to see. There was clearly a mathematical error, and it it came out it seemed like they were testing at 40% THC, which is biologically impossible. So were they shoveling keef on top of the flower and then testing that as a sample?
No, because remember, I tested it, and what was it, 28% or 27%? So I mean, that's fine. And that a lot of flour lives in the 27% range. What happens in these kind of cases, when I look at that case with ACT Laboratories and what was it was a publicly traded company,
It was in
Ascend
Chicago,
Well,
right?
Ascend Wellness.
Right.
So the first mistake that's made here is that these companies should know what the total THC formula is. So the first thing they don't do is they don't follow that. They just add things together,
Hmm.
add numbers together, and it comes up with a higher value than it could possibly be anyway.
Right.
Like you said, it should be 40%, but the label says 46%. And then, like you said, Catherine, when you look at flower products, there's nothing in the 40% range. It all lives in the 16 to 25% range. Maybe some's in the high 20s. Maybe a few products are in the low 30s, but I've never tested a product in the 40% range, and certainly not 46%. So what you have here, and ACT Labs test the product at 40%, right? Or
How do
so
they get that number?
well, I'm not going to impugn ACT Laboratories, because I'm going to assume that ACT Laboratories is acting it with integrity, and they tested the sample and this is what they got. Well, companies can create a fraudulent sample, right? Keef it, like you talked about, or spray it with distillate or something,
Hmm.
so that you end up with a higher THCA number than is physically possible on the plant. Then that sample goes to the lab. The lab has a difficult, if not impossible, time determining that it's adulterated. They only know they get 40%, 45% THCA. And now what do you do? Do you issue the COA? Do you tell your client that you're going to issue it, but you're going to mark it as adulterated? What goes on here? And so, in this particular case, I would say that Ascend Wellness has a real problem here, and I'm not going to say that ACT Laboratories did anything wrong in this case, but this is an example, right, of what's going on in the licensed cannabis industry.
So
So,
there's no
yeah.
consequence for this.
Yeah, there are consequences. Sure, there are companies that have already been sued. there are, I can
Sued
think of
out
a
of
couple.
business or sued
No,
to be hit where they might not make that mistake again?
class action lawsuits. So
Yeah,
California has
yeah.
already had three or four class action lawsuits for potency issues on their label
Was that like
because
against
the
Jeter, like and Stizzy, like some of those like
yeah,
those brands that I
yeah.
tell my people to stay away from?
I don't know if Stizzy's been sued yet.
I think
Lowell,
they've been sued,
yeah,
but
Lowell
I don't know if it
Farms
was
is
potency or for pesticides or whatnot. But
yeah,
okay,
yeah, and I can't think of that off the top of my head
okay.
in a
So can
second.
you? So the
Sure,
class action lawsuit is how the consumer fights back.
sure, yeah, and I think it's a worthy effort and something to look into because look, with so many products mislabeled,
Mm,
right? Because the label creates a contract between the buyer and the seller. Just like when you go to the store and buy 2% milk, it's supposed to be 2%, not whole milk or not water, or right? It's supposed to be what the
what it
label
says it
says.
is.
Yeah. And so this is one of the ways that consumers can help correct the cannabis industry by working with an investigator like me and saying, hey, Kirk, I bought this product. Can I have it? Will you test it for me, please? And if it's labeled incorrectly, then I want to consider a class action lawsuit against the company. And those kinds of things, I think over time, those kinds of civil suits change the industry for the better.
Thank you. Um, I I'm so thankful for the work that you're doing. And I know it's going to take time, but it's nice to not only complain about something, but to offer up solutions. So, can you tell me about some of the class action lawsuits that have already occurred and kind of what the results were? I think the part that is almost a little bit mind-blowing to me is that obviously cannabis is legal. Like we've been doing this for 15 years, but it's like, wait, we can stand up for ourselves? Like we're allowed to take like a cannabis problem to the court? Like that's almost like miraculous to me, which seems like a
Yeah, and
silly detail, but moving past that, what have those lawsuits been about? What have they found? Yeah, can you just tell us about that
yeah, I know I think they're all still going through the system,
in
if you
process?
will.
Okay.
Yeah, class action lawsuits take years to resolve unless parties resolve really, really early. But I think most of them have been about either potency or pesticides or mold and mildew, and that's exactly what class action litigation, from a non-legal perspective, this isn't legal advice, obviously, but look, class action lawsuits are a sector, if you will, because when a consumer goes in and buys something for $40
Mm.
and they didn't get what they were supposed to get, well, you can't sue somebody for $40 necessarily. And so you can go a class action route, and somebody can be a representative of the class and represent all the people that have made this purchase. And now you have a tool to cause, if you will, the cannabis business, the defendant, assuming that the facts are correct. Now you have a tool to be able to use to cause the defendant to say, "Hey, I'm gonna change the way I do business, and I want to make sure my labels are accurate." Listen, this isn't difficult to do. But when you get behind the curtain of the cannabis businesses and the hemp businesses, here's what you find. Nobody's doing any bench testing. Nobody's doing any, and what I mean by nobody is almost no one
Sure.
is doing any kind of inline testing to see what they're manufacturing and how they need to adjust their processes so their labels are accurate. They just make a product, send 20 of them off, 20 pre-rolls off to the lab for testing. The lab gives them a COA, and they slap that number on the 30,000 pre-rolls they just ran off of the machine, during maybe a continuous batch or a big batch event. And that's going to cause problems because you don't know whether you're controlling your manufacturing process from start to finish. And I
This
don't
wouldn't
know.
occur in any other industry. This is
Right.
unheard of in
Yeah.
any other industry. Is that correct?
Quality control, quality assurance. Companies that make food stuff,
That goes
things
in your
we
body.
inhale, yeah, things we inhale, things we rub on our body, things we eat. right? They're doing quality assurance and quality control. They're doing current good manufacturing practices exactly so that, for one of the reasons that the label matches the product inside of it. But there's a huge pull for some companies. Hey, consumers come in and they want high THC levels, and I can't grow THC like that. And so I'm going to create a fraudulent product to send to the lab to get fraudulent results because I want my top shelf products, right? And
I
so it's a real problem.
and thankfully, I think we're almost at this point where we're getting back to basics, where people are realizing that the high THC trend is not what we're chasing anymore. That we want lower THC, we want terpenes, we want various cannabinoids, and that the people, it's funny because I remember at one point started with medical in 2012, but there was some menu online and they broke down the price by the THC.
Right. Yeah.
And that, from a psychological perspective as a consumer, first of all, is sort of a weird purchasing mindset. Like it kind of almost makes me feel like I'm being penalized if I want a lower THC product because of the price. So I hope that we're moving away from this chase for high THC. Um,
Yeah, and I don't know if we are or not. Back before licensing in
mm,
California,
mm,
I was in the California scene. All right, before licensing in California, you had top shelf bud, but it wasn't tested, right? But based on how it looked, how it smelled,
smelled.
how sticky it was, how tight the bud structure was, that is it in grow, is it indoor, is it mixed light, is it outdoor, is it hoop house? What is it? Well, the best as it was graded by whoever was doing the buying, that went to the top shelf, that got the higher price.
Mm,
Well, then along comes testing,
mm.
and now the industry goes, oh, well, now that we can measure THC, that's the way we're going to determine what's the best. And so
And
it's
they've been
just kind of
right.
evolved. It's
I
kind
mean,
of
they
evolved a
in
little
terms of
bit.
what sells.
Yeah, it's evolved a little bit, and there are a lot of consumers out there that THC shop. Hey, I got $50 to spend. I want the most THC I can get. But here's what I would suggest to people. Look, just stay away from anything that's 30% or above. You're probably not getting it anyway.
I'm with you.
Buy the product that's 21, 22, 23%, whatever. Look at the terpenes profile that you like. Don't buy 40% bud, 50%
You're missing the
uh,
whole point of cannabis.
infused pre-rolls. You're probably not getting it anyway. Or not probably, most likely you're not getting it anyway. I mean, I know what to go pick up, I know what to go and pick off the shelf to have tested, you know, uh, so it's a problem.
Two questions. One is almost weekly, I get an email from someone somewhere in America saying that they're suspicious of their cannabis and they are asking me for a lab recommendation to have it tested. I don't know what to tell these people. What would you tell these people?
Have them call me. I'll talk to them. I'll
Okay.
talk to them and give them as much information as I possibly can. I mean, there's labs across the country that I work with that I trust,
Can any
right?
consumer can a consumer walk into a lab with a sample and say, "Hey, can I pay for this to be tested?" Or do you
Sometimes.
need a license to have it to be tested in the first place?
No, no, no. There are many states where you can have product tested, but the lab might say why. I mean,
Re
so
Reasonable.
yeah, I mean, I test products because I'm involved in lawsuits all
Yeah.
over the country. So, I call up the lab, I make arrangements,
And
I
I'm sure they know you
understand
at this
chain of
point.
yeah, I understand chain of custody, and we all know each other, and hey, and I work hard at finding accurate labs. There are some labs I won't go within 5 miles of because I know what they do, in
Are
the
they being
cannabis
paid under
sector.
the table? Is it
I don't know.
okay?
Look, look, customers are big business for labs, right? I
Mm.
mean, I'm not disparaging anyone. I'm just saying when you have a customer that wants to bring you $500,000 in testing a year, that's a lot of money. And you can, I've talked to lab directors, and I'm sure there are others that you could probably have on the show that would say, look, Here's a normal course of business for me. Cannabis representatives will walk in and say, I need my product tested, but if it can't come back at 35% total THC, I'll just take my business somewhere else. So don't even bother to test it.
Oh my
This
God.
happens all day long.
Wow. That is
Yeah.
not how science is done.
Yeah.
That's like,
If this, I have a problem with pesticides. If this can't pass pesticides, then I don't want to pay, you $500 to have my pesticide testing done. I'll go somewhere else.
wow. You know, I had a friend many years ago who tried to start a testing lab, and I remember her telling me that she couldn't compete with the other guys that she had integrity and she was a scientist, and she said, I can't, it's not a business for me. And it's unfortunate to hear that. This sounds like it's a problem in every state where cannabis is legal. Is this an American problem? Is this happening in Canada, Germany, Israel, Australia? Do you know?
I've talked to a few people on different continents
Yeah, what do
that
what do they
say
say?
the problem exists there too. I would say it is a problem across America, and it's an integrity problem. It's
Mm,
a moral and
mm,
ethical problem, right? And I've talked to some lab folks that have lost everything. I mean, millions of dollars in the hole because they won't commit lab fraud. I'm thinking of a couple in California right now. But look, it's I mean, from a moral perspective, from a situational ethics perspective,
mm.
if business after business comes in and says, test my product, but this is what I need, and you say, no, I won't do that, well, you're closing your doors. You're not going to be open for very long.
Wow.
And it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to say, I don't care. I don't care if I go bankrupt. I'm not going to commit fraud. I feel bad for the labs, frankly. I really do.
Yeah. What?
I really do.
So what what can the average consumer do? What can the average senior do? That we our purchasing power makes helps shape decisions. What can we do so that we create an industry where like this is a thing of the past where people are like, remember those ridiculous days where they were testing at 46% THC? Um, does it need to go like pharmaceutical? Does it need to go corporate? Like what's the balance?
Well, and my record, by the way, is 50% on flour. That's what I saw it advertised at, which is just crazy.
Like it's testing at THC at 50%.
No, it didn't. It was advertised at 50% total THC, which
And
is
like the
just
thing is you
crazy.
laugh about it, but it's not funny anymore.
Yeah, it's called Bruce Wayne. It was called Bruce Wayne was the strain name out of Michigan. Yeah, it's pretty sad. Well, so here's what I would say is look, get involved. If people don't get involved with change, then nothing changes. So the industry's been going on for all these years, right? California or cannabis was first legal in California in 1996, licensed in Colorado in 2010, whatever it's been,
Mm.
and look where we are today. And does it go corporate? I don't know. We started off the show with Ascend Wellness, a publicly traded company, 46% total THC. That's not, to me, that's not an argument for corporate coming in. I don't think pharmaceutical industry is going to touch cannabis for the most part. I don't know that it's too small of an industry for them when you stop and think about it, I think, really. And then they've got the same problem that the whole entire supply chain has, fraud.
Mm.
And and if you're, I don't know, pick pick a pharmacy, CVS pharmacy. I mean, if you're CVS pharmacy and you're selling mislabeled products, you're a huge target, right?
You're
I don't think
screwed.
CVS I
Yeah.
don't think CVS pharmacy wants to be that kind of a target for plaintiff attorneys. so
Well,
this is what I say. Look, find folks like me out there that are focused on consumer fraud and make a difference and maybe get your product tested. Hey, I had this problem. This is what happened to me when I bought this product, and let's see how we can change an industry. Maybe you're represented by an attorney, maybe not. but I think it's going to take a focused effort by the regulatory sector, the enforcement sector, and civilly through lawsuits to really turn this industry around and change things, because so far they're very, very slow to change. Now, having said that, there are some great operators out there. I mean, there are
Absolutely.
some folks that are just doing an amazing job. They care about the product in the package, they care about accuracy. There are labs out there that are doing wonderful, wonderful things and are really propping up this industry, in a from an integrity perspective. Our problem is there's still too much consumer fraud going on, and it needs to be addressed, by all these different folks to bring it all to conform everyone to being honest with the consumer. Because look, here's the bottom line: the cannabis business is defrauding their own customers, right?
And we're not all potheads. We're like we can take action once something is wrong. So I'm just so thankful that you're telling us. I think a lot of people are gonna honestly be shocked to hear this. Um,
And
and
listen, the numbers I've thrown around, they're not stuff I've heard from someone else. I'm shelf testing product across America. These are my results. This is what I've found. This is from me examining packaging, like I did for that is Send Wellness product,
yeah,
banana, whatever it was.
yeah.
This is me doing the actual work and saying, look what we're finding out there on the streets, right? At the retail level. Yeah.
Well, as you continue, finding stuff, tell me. I'll publish it. We can team
Sure.
up, share it together, have it go viral.
Yeah. Love to.
But hopefully this was just the beginning of, many more conversations. This was absolutely fascinating. And thank you so much for your time, Kirk. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you for everything you're doing.
Yeah, you're welcome, Catherine, and thank you for everything you're doing, because getting the word out to people. I mean, that is the most important thing. If people don't know, how what do you do if you don't know? You don't know what we don't know, right? But
Exactly.
you're educating the seniors in this case, whoever it is out there. I happen to be one of those, and you're doing a great thing. So thanks a lot.